meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Welcome to the Forgotten Podcast, where we are sharing the stories of the foster care community and offering hope and practical help for the foster parenting journey. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, you'll notice that our backdrop is new. It's the very first time we get to use our new studio, and I'm very excited about that. But that is not really what this episode is about. I'm really excited to welcome Melissa Murphy and Chandler Edge to the show. They're going to discuss an issue that many foster parents face without maybe even knowing it: sensory processing disorder. It's often undiagnosed and misunderstood. It can be frustrating and heartbreaking to deal with for the child who is suffering, and also for the caregivers trying to make sense of behaviors and needs. Melissa, an occupational therapist, is the owner at Beyond Measure Pediatric Therapies. She is a wife and mom. Chandler is a partner at Beyond Measure, and she's also a wife and mom, and their practice provides specialized care for complex medical diagnosis and works to promote inclusion in their community. First of all, ladies, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great conversation. I personally know very little about sensory processing, so I'm very excited to learn, and I know it's going to be an encouragement to our listeners. Let's start with you, Chandler. We know that there's a significant number of foster children who deal with sensory processing disorder to some extent or another. So let's just kind of level the playing field here and just help us understand what sensory processing disorder even is.
Yeah. So, sensory processing and the sensory system is just a very complex thing in general. And it's also something that practitioners are learning a lot about too. So there's really a lot of unknown about the sensory system. But what we do know is that how we navigate our day-to-day experiences, it relies heavily on our sensory system. Our sensory system, it's controlled by our central nervous system, which is kind of considered like our primary control center. And it's known as the primary control center because it's responsible for how we interpret sensory information, how we organize it, and then how we respond to it. And so, as you can probably imagine, that is necessary for how we go about our day to day. And so typically we want our sensory system to be intact, but unfortunately that's not always the case, especially within the foster care community. And when it's not intact, we like to say that it's kind of out of balance. And so when it is out of balance, basically we are not able to take the information around us and organize it and interpret it and respond to it. And so some children do have a diagnosis of sensory processing disorder, but a lot don't. And we were actually talking about within the foster care community, you probably don't see that a lot because just because of the nature of the system. And sometimes there's like a lack of resources and a lack of testing. And so a lot of times I feel like parents are left with like, what is going on? What do we need to do? Can someone
Yeah.
please help me?
Yeah.
And so whenever, sensory processing is at question and that sensory system is out of balance, the brain is unable to organize the information and respond to the information around that is in that child's surroundings. So it makes functioning on a day-to-day basis very hard.
Yeah. Man, and that is very frustrating and can feel very hopeless, right? I'm assuming.
Yes.
And it's so much more than I think when I first hear sensory processing, I'm like, it has to do with touch, and is that kind of a common maybe misconception that it's just kind of about how things feel or how your clothes feel on you or what, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, yes, tactile touch does play a part in that. But when we think about sensory processing, we have to think about all the senses. So that goes from touch to sound to your hearing to seeing to knowing where your body is in space. taste, it's our entire sensory system.
Which then impacts how we feel and how we behave and all the things. I mean, yeah.
And so, like, when, your children that struggle with sensory processing, those are your kiddos that maybe have low self-esteem or are very quick to respond. They get overwhelmed easily. They typically have behaviors, and those are mistaken as, like, they just don't wanna do something. But it's really their way of telling us, like, "Hey, this is hard."
Well, Melissa, is there a specific cause to this disorder? And we know you've already mentioned, Chandler, this is prevalent in the foster care community, but yeah, how does this happen?
Yeah, so that is kind of the question of the century. I mean,
Mm,
OT, this is where we nerd out. We
mm,
love sensory processing because it plays a factor in everything you do every day. But yeah, we really don't know of one single cause. And oftentimes, just from experience, I feel like it's always more than just one reason. And so when you're thinking about, how to figure out kind of the foundation of where it could be stemming from, we consider, genetic factors, which with foster kids, sometimes we don't always have the full picture of the medical history. Most times we don't. So there could be something genetic that's in that biological mom or father's family line that we just don't have access to even having an idea unless genetic testing were to be performed. So genetics can play a big part in it. The other one is just the mom's, prenatal care, how her pregnancy how the journey in pregnancy was. Did she have any health conditions? Was she on any specific medications that could have affected something? Did she not have prenatal vitamins or prenatal care? So all of that can play a role as well as the birth of the child. So were they premature? Were
mm,
they a C-section? Were they not? So all of those play a very big role in how our central nervous system is the foundation, how it's created, and also how it's developed over time. So,
yeah,
there is not one single answer. And I will say
yeah.
too, another thing that we have to also consider is just, is there another diagnosis that's playing a role as well? So a lot of times these children will have a diagnosis of ADHD or autism or anxiety, and all of those play a major role in triggering that nervous system. And so, it's our job to kind of help reorganize that system and help them to be able to function more efficiently throughout their day. And then lastly, I would say environmental factors can play a big role, especially thinking about children in the foster care world. A lot of times their home life may have included some sort of, separation from their birth mom, some sort of trauma, whether that was, sexual abuse or physical or emotional abuse, neglect, anything environmental that, and trauma, quote unquote, is different for everyone. So everyone
Mhm.
interprets that differently in their body and their mind. So any sort of environmental factor that could have affected that child early in life or even, in their teen years,
Mm,
we can see just, sensory dysregulation happen in high school when they've been,
mm,
somewhat okay, in their early
huh,
childhood. So that's a really big factor as well that we play a role in just trying to identify. And
yeah. And I'm sure that process is laden with lots of feelings and emotions. Like, I'm thinking for biological parents who have biological children, who experience this, there might be some feelings of guilt or did I do something? Did I cause this?
yes.
Is that a common thing?
Absolutely. Yes. And of course, too, the feeling of hopelessness for a foster parent that does bring their child into us. They're like, we feel hopeless because we don't know what's caused it and we also don't know how to address it. We just feel overwhelmed and the behaviors can kind of be the front line. So they're just trying to make it day to day. And so it's a really challenging area to kind of step into.
And I think it's important to note that, for foster parents, or if there are biological children in the home, it's not your fault. It's not, and you're doing what you can to help that child.
We can be so hard on ourselves when we feel out
Mhm.
of control. It's like we almost want to put it in a box somehow and have some sort of like, this is why. And, here's who's to blame. I'm to blame or they're to blame or whatever. But so often these things are just, it's not cut and dried like
Yeah.
that.
It's
exactly.
also easy to blame ourselves. So we're the
Yeah.
easiest.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah. Well, that's why I'm glad we're talking about this today. So we've talked about, kind of the basics, like what it is, what
mhm.
causes it. Um, let's talk about what it looks like. Because maybe there's someone listening who's like, don't know anything about this, have a child who we're experiencing a lot of things that do feel hard. Could this be something we're dealing with? So help us paint a picture of what it can look like.
So when we're thinking in terms of sensory, there's actually several types of sensory processing disorder. But Melissa and I kind of felt like for the conversation for today, we were just going to focus on the most that we see, the most commonly seen ones. And so there's sensory seeking, and then there's actually sensory over responsivity, and then sensory under responsivity. And so we're just going to kind of break those down so that the listeners can hear what each one kind of entails. And so for sensory seeking, those are your kiddos that crave sensory input. Their bodies, they are searching for something. And so those are your kiddos. A lot of times you'll see them like fall to the floor, or maybe they're hyperactive. So you'll see them jumping a lot. They might fall out of their chair. They're pretty restless. Those are your kiddos, like they need some kind of input to be able to make it through the day. And a lot of times we see parents or educators and even practitioners kind of mark that off as like ADHD or behaviors, especially within the school system. And so that's what sensory seeking looks like. And then you have sensory over responsivity, and those are your kiddos that are extremely sensitive to sensory stimuli. So something like sitting in a room with lights like we have on, that can be a lot on their nervous system. And in response, you might see them get really upset, or you might see them not be able to focus. So you have that over response responsiveness to that sensory behavior or that sensory stimuli, and then your sensory under responsivity. Those are your kiddos that they don't really respond to sensory input or sensory stimuli. And so they're the ones that it's really hard to excite. They might seem like they have low motivation, low participation. They might not respond when they fall. So they might not respond to pain or hot, cold. They might not respond to touch. Loud sounds don't bother them. And so a lot of times, really with all of these, there's a big safety concern surrounding the sensory system and how we need to respond to that and so on. So,
Yeah. So just a couple questions on that. With the very first one, sensory seeking, I think,
mhm,
falling out of chairs, hyperactive, is that like is the sensory they're seeking like the feeling of
mhm,
the ground hitting that and them hitting the ground or like is that what you're
mhm.
meaning? Okay.
Yeah, and I like Melissa, you can kind of piggyback off this, but I like to explain it to parents like they're 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 looking for something, like, internally. And so where
Mm,
you and I are able to just sit in a chair and our bodies are able to process what we're doing, how we're attending to a task, these children, their bodies feel really out of sorts. And so
mm,
they're trying to fill that void with the impact of falling. And in the OT
mm,
world, we call it proprioceptive touch. But they're just trying to fill whatever it
mm.
is that they're seeking.
Would these be kids that would come up and want hugs, want that
Mhm,
kind of thing more too? Okay.
mhm,
Yes.
Yeah.
And then also too thinking like oral seeking. So it might be the child that's putting everything in their mouth and you're like, "Why are you
Mhm.
eating pencils and you're at
Yeah.
your plate for the food?" And it's, they're just trying to get any feedback they can from
Okay.
that input. So
mhm,
that's another one we see,
Mhm.
in the
And the one where the over,
mhm.
or maybe the under, that is, are they not even feeling like hot, cold? Like they're not responding to it, but is it like almost that they don't even recognize that they're maybe getting burnt or things like that?
It's usually a delayed
Okay.
response,
Mhm.
and so it just takes a lot more for their sensory system to activate, and so usually say they touched a hot stove, they
Mhm.
might keep their hand there because they don't
Hmm.
realize, like, "Hey, this hurts. I don't need to be doing this."
Mm.
And then by the time that they recognize, "Oh, that hurts," it's
There's a lot of
a lot
damage been
worse.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you mentioned a little bit earlier that people can misunderstand, or like even people can misdiagnose these behaviors. They can also be misinterpreted as defiance, right? Or obstinate behavior. So, how do we know the difference, especially when we're talking about like young kids who are naturally going to be more falling on the floor, naturally going to be more oral, or, things like that? Um, how do we know the difference between typical childhood behavior and behaviors that push the boundaries of the sensory seeking?
Yeah, so I would say, and this is kind of how I describe it to parents. We know that any behavior that a child presents with is them trying to communicate something to us. So they're communicating a need. Now we have so many children that are also nonverbal. So you're throwing in that factor as well of they can't use their words or their mouth
Mhm.
to speak what they need. So they're using their body and their movement and their behaviors. And even children who are verbal, we know that when there is a behavior, whether it's a good or a bad behavior, it's communicating something. And so I always like to think of it in a sense of if it's truly a sensory meltdown, like they are truly overstimulated or overwhelmed or just shutting down because of a sensory related issue, typically that's going to persist no matter the consequence. So if a parent is telling you, no, or I'm taking that toy that you want so badly away, that doesn't even matter to them because they're just trying to feel in control within themselves. So a lot of times that's how you can tell if it's sensory versus a true, defiant behavior. For the children who are actually showing behaviors, they are the ones who it's more goal directed. So they know they want something out of that behavior. And so, say they are throwing a tantrum at the store because they wanted that piece of candy that mom said no to. As soon as that candy is either given to them or as soon as they get the attention from mom that they were seeking or a response that they were desiring, oftentimes that behavior will stop. So there will be an end to it,
Mhm.
and you can tell. And I always say, if you're seeing behaviors and you're like, I truly don't know if it's one or the other,
Mhm.
watch, what time of day is it? Is it when they're more sleepy? Is it when they're
Mm.
just getting home from school and they're just done and just need a moment? Is it across different environments? So is it only at home that they're doing it? Could it just be a behavior that they know that one parent can really get fired up over what they
Mhm.
are protesting or wanting?
Mhm.
So, you kinda have to consider it the consistency as
Mhm.
well. Is it
Yeah.
every morning when you wake up? And I always love the example of, parents will come in and say, I don't know what it is, my child will not get dressed in the morning. If when it comes time, they'll brush their teeth, they'll eat their breakfast, but when it comes time to put their clothes on, they throw down, and that could be hiding the clothes, throwing the clothes, just complete refusal. And oftentimes that looks like, okay, they just don't wanna go to school or they don't wanna follow directions. But also, coming from an OT perspective, we can look and see, okay, is that the case? Or is there something triggering them at school that could be causing them to not want to get ready and get out the door? Or could it be that the seams in that clothing are just so painful to the touch of their skin? They're processing it at a different level than we are. Or is it the tags that are in their clothing? Is it the type of fabric in the jeans? Is it too tight or too hard? Is the waistline uncomfortable? And they don't know how to tell us that because they're dysregulated, but they're telling us in their own way. So that's an example I always like to use because we see it so frequently.
Mhm.
And that could be as simple as cutting out the tags and seeing if there's a difference that day.
I'm guessing uh younger kids who don't necessarily have the language, or nonverbal kids,
Mhm.
is it showing up more dramatically for them than older kids who might have language, or even in older kids, they don't maybe know why they're feeling that way? Like what's it look like in different stages of childhood?
I can say specifically for your older kiddos, a lot of times those are the ones that we do see where they withdraw, or just
Mhm.
avoidant. They avoid. And that's because, assuming that they do have language and cognitively, they're developed, their reasoning is more developed than that of like a toddler. And so they are able to kind of process like, hey, I'm going to respond this way instead of just cry or, throw down on the floor. Whereas like a toddler, they don't have the language, and they're also still developing self-regulation, and coping mechanisms. And so that's a lot for a toddler to try to explain to someone like, "Hey, I don't like the tags in my clothes. I don't really know
Right.
what I like what it is that I don't like about this, but I don't like
Mhm.
something."
Yeah.
Um, and so and that's just from, like, my personal experience as a practitioner.
Mhm.
The older kiddos are usually the ones who we have, like, they're titled lazy, or
Mm.
low motivation, low self-worth, low
Hmm.
confidence, a lot of anxiety.
Hey friends, it's Jami, just popping in here for a minute to say we love to hear from you. And it's really important to us that what we're bringing to you is actually helping you, is meeting felt needs. Would you give us a rating and review or contact us directly and just let us know how we are being helpful, but also are there ways we can be more helpful to you? We want to hear from you. We're encouraged by you and we're here for you. So thank you for taking a few moments to do that for us. And now let's head back to the episode. So let's say I am now, as I listen, I'm like starting to go, this might be this might be my kid. What would be a good next step?
A good next step would be to always reach out to, like, your primary care provider, your child's primary care provider, because you wanna make sure that there aren't any additional underlying causes. And then if you and your child's primary care provider agree, that a referral to occupational therapy
Mhm.
might be beneficial, that would be the next step. And then as an occupational therapy practitioner, so Melissa's an occupational therapist and I'm an occupational therapist assistant. So I don't do evaluations. So I'm going to let Melissa kind of go in more on what that might look like.
Yeah, I agree with Chandler. I would say talk to your primary physician, and then if you can get an OT evaluation in, that would be a great starting point. Now, when you talk to the physician, they may go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to send you a referral for OT. I'm also going to go ahead and just put out there that you need to go ahead and have a psychological evaluation done for your child or genetic testing. He or she may go ahead and give you those up front. Um, if they do not, during that assessment with the occupational therapist, if we feel like, "Hey, we need to paint this picture a little bit more clearly, these are what we recommend," then we can go from there as well. So, there's many times when I say, "Hey, let's contact the doctor and just see if he's on board or she's on board, and let's get that referral to the developmental pediatrician or the psychological evaluation." Even sometimes nutrition is playing a big role, and we see that with the oral side of things and the tactile side of things, and they truly are malnourished because they are not getting what they need because either they're fearful of it, or they just don't know how to process the steps to get there. So sometimes we even refer for, pediatric nutrition as well.
Okay.
But yeah, OT would be a great starting point just because this is our world, this is what we love, um, and being able to guide you as far as what to do at home, starting with the basics and then growing from there.
And is someone comes to you and you're doing this evaluation and you're suspecting that this may be the case.
Mhm.
What kind of first steps are you giving them? Like you mentioned, things they could do at home in the meantime as they're kind of waiting to hear for sure.
I always try and just give 1 or 2 things because we're already overwhelming them with the evaluation, and
Yeah, sure.
we're dumping a lot of information out at one time. And
Yeah.
so all of that information about, "Oh, well, my child now has all of this going on," and now they've thrown in a home program with 20 different things I have to start doing when I get home. So we
Right.
try not to do that. We can get excited and want to do that, but we try our
Mhm.
best to calm down and start with 1 or 2 of the really big things that they're struggling with and just say, "Try this at home for 2 weeks, and let's just see how it goes."
Mm.
And a lot of times we'll print out pictures or handouts or show them videos or demonstrate it in the session so that the parents can feel confident when they get home
Mhm.
to carry that out as well.
And what would that is there like an example of a few of those things that you might be encouraging them to do?
A lot of times we'll do something that's called like a sensory diet, and it's a great home exercise program, home education tool, and it kind of just breaks down like this is what we want to see you doing. And the thing about sensory is there has to be home carryover, because if not, one 30-minute session a week isn't gonna do much, and so, like, one of my favorite things to do is look at the child's morning and bedtime routine, their morning and evening routine, and see, okay, how can I help them set up their day for success and then also end their day, to allow them get a good night's rest because that also plays a very important role in just how children function daily. So say we have like a sensory seeker in a morning routine, one of my go-tos is like let's bear crawl down the hallway. Let's get
Hmm.
some heavy work. Let's tire out those muscles. Let's give you that input that you're seeking. Another one is a lot of times families will have trampolines at home,
Mm.
and so I'll tell parents like, "Hey, let's let them jump on the trampoline for 10 minutes a day."
Mhm.
Or when you see that your child is struggling, let's take a break from what we're doing. We'll go jump on the trampoline and then we'll come
Mm.
back and let's see if we can push through and finish that task.
I would also add to that too, a lot of times we'll throw in those sensory diets, like more crunchy or harder to chew
Mhm,
foods. So, like, if they can tolerate or they don't have an allergy to peanut butter, or just, like, crunchy snacks that, they could get that input orally, that's a great thing to send with them to school or,
mhm,
childcare as well because throughout the day, they may need that input, and then I love I always forget, I think it's the Nalgene water bottles, but they have the
mhm.
thick straw that you can you have to bite it and suck it at the same time to
Get
get
it
the
to come
water
up.
to come through. I love that because if it's a child who's chewing on their shirt or their pencils or, having those oral seeking behaviors or just fidgety and restlessness in the classroom, they can take a sip of their water bottle and no one has to they don't have to feel like I have this extra tool that makes me different from my friends or my peers. They can just take the water and know that's helping regulate them. So that's one that I also love to add into that as well.
And then another just really easy thing to have at home is a weighted blanket. So a lot of times kids with difficulties with sensory processing, they have a really hard time with self-regulation. And so a weighted blanket is a great tool to have because that provides a sense of comfort and calmness. And so a lot of times, like even as an adult who's I say my sensory system is intact, but, that is I mean, those work wonders, and that's a really I mean, you can get it at Walmart or you can get it on Amazon. So a lot of these sensory techniques that we do as practitioners are very easy to carry over within the home.
Speaking of the weighted blankets, I know there are different weights. Is
Mhm.
there is that just more preference or how do you even know where to start with the weighted blankets?
We will use the rule of thumb of, the weight is to be 10% of the child's body weight. So that's a good starting point, and then you sometimes do have children who need a little more than that, and then you have children who they might not need that much. But whenever using a weighted vest, if you're it's not recommended or a weighted blanket or vest. It's not recommended to do it without consultation from an occupational therapist. But if you are, I would always say go lighter. Don't go heavier. Um, and then obviously, like if you're able to use it alongside the guidance of an occupational therapist.
Let's talk about a little bit about outside the home, church, classroom. How can we kind of advocate for our kids once let's say we do know now that this is what they're navigating? How can we help I guess one is advocate for, but another is maybe someone's listening who does run, a nursery, is kind of leading the church nursery or a teacher. How can they set up the classroom, the space? This really could even be at home to be a really helpful place for our kids with sensory needs.
Yeah, I would say this is one of my go-to things to start with as well,
Okay.
across the board at home or, we do it in our churches as well. really just setting up a place of safety. So whether it's a corner of a room where you can have the lights dimmed and just have like, Christmas lights up, or a lamp, or just some kind of lighting that's more dim and calming. There's all kinds of stuff out there. And then also having a comfy seat that they like to sit in. So whether that's a bean bag or just a soft blanket to kind of snuggle up with, a cozy chair, even if it's just a mat on the floor that gives them that designated area, like, this is my calm corner. This is where I can go and get the sensory needs that I need and step away from whether it's the classroom and the chaos of
Mm-hmm.
all my peers, or, my siblings at home. This is where I
Yeah.
can go and have some me time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we love to have, fidget. So if it's a child that really needs that movement or that tactile input, maybe have a little basket of different toys that they can kind of fidget with their hands, whether it's spinners or
Mm-hmm.
the little balls that you can squeeze that have like the jelly inside.
Yes,
All
yes.
kinds of, and Target dollar section is like my go-to.
Mhm.
Just this kind of stuff. But just anything that they kind of gravitate towards to help calm themselves, I would try and
Mm,
pull into that area. And then also, like Chandler said, the weighted lap pads are amazing to have
mm,
those. Even if you had a few different weights, that the child kind of knew which one felt best to them.
mm.
Um, I'm trying to think what else. And if it's something that
Headphones.
needs the movement, sorry, what were you
I
gonna
was
say?
gonna say headphones.
Oh, yes, yes, to kind of
Hmm.
quiet the sound.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll throw in, like, if they have a yoga ball or an exercise ball at home, they can sit
Hmm.
on that or bounce on that or roll, or even mom or dad or whoever could also roll it over their body and squish them out like pizza dough, and that gives
Hmm.
them that deep feel good input. So,
Hmm.
that would be a good starting point. I could go on and on, but
That's great. And I think maybe just like with the advocating, how would you help them help a foster parent? Maybe that isn't really available right now at church or even in a classroom that they're in. What would be some tips for how they could advocate in a way that they're understood?
A lot of churches specifically right now are moving towards being more inclusive.
Mm,
So a lot of churches right now are very open to how can we better serve
that's great.
our audience? How can we better serve our children?
Mm-hmm.
And so you never know until you ask.
Yeah.
And so that's just speaking for, churches in general, but if there is a family who they do have a child who has specific sensory needs, I would take it to the church and just see like, "Hey, this is where we're at. Is there anything that we can do?" And, I always say it's intimidating, but the worst they can say is no. And then if no is the answer, okay, let's see how can we incorporate these things ourselves? Because no one will ever tell you no to being able to bringing what you need for your child. So whether, if that means that they sit through a worship system, you can bring headphones, you can bring a weighted blanket, they can have those fidgets. But the nice thing is I feel like in this day and time, a lot of people and a lot of organizations are becoming a lot more open to being inclusive.
Every child and situation is unique. We know this, right? And obviously, we know that there might be other things going on beyond this in their lives as well. But is there one? Let me start that over. Every child and situation is so unique. But do you have a number one suggestion for parents with children who struggle with sensory processing issues?
I would say, and it's easier said than done as a mom myself, but I would just say to be patient with yourself, first of all, and then also with the child. And just, it's okay to stop and take a deep breath and switch gears or change, directions of what you have been doing and trying something new. So that's my greatest piece of advice would be just to be patient with yourself,
Patient.
and building that trust and showing them the patience of, I may not understand you right now, but I'm trying. That's what's gonna make a difference long term, is just showing up for them and letting them, meeting them right where they are.
And I would say, just for parents to trust their gut, because if you sense that something is off or your child is trying to tell you something, you're feeling that for a reason. And so it is important to trust our gut, so that you can do what you can to help your child. And then also by trusting your gut, you can build that rapport and that bond with your child because, like Melissa was saying, you're showing them like, "Hey, I am here for you. I'm willing to do what I can to help you." And I feel like within the foster care community, you're in that community for a reason because you
Yeah.
have that want to help.
That's fantastic. Well, Melissa and Chandler, it's been a great conversation. I've learned a lot. I appreciate you guys both. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and thanks for being on with us today.
Thank you again for listening today. I hope this episode resonated with you. Let us know your thoughts. We really love hearing from you. And as always, if you want to learn more about TFI, catch up on past episodes, read engaging articles, or partner with us on mission with a gift of any amount, head over to theforgotteninitiative.org. And until next time, remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, misunderstood, or questioning, why am I doing what I'm doing? Remember, you have a whole community here who cares for you. And even more, Jesus is fully able to meet your every need. Lean on Him and find rest in Him today. I look so forward to being together again very soon.
Resonate.